Could we take off our masks when we're talking? We're a million feet apart and we've all had a jillion vaccines or whatever. Because it's just like, you know.
Okay, I will do my best to articulate as much as possible. I'd like to follow our policies because we currently have that as a policy. Thank you. Others may take it off if they'd like to. Are we good to go? Thank you. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 26th, and this is a study session of the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board. This study session is hereby called to order, and the first on our agenda is item 1B, data and assessment, measuring and monitoring student learning. And I believe, Brian, are you going to start this evening, or is Amanda? Brian, okay. Oh, no, we're not going to do the pledge this evening, just at regular meetings.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Madam Superintendent. We want to present what our current assessment system looks like for this year, and also what current data we have, what it looks like, and how we report it and use it. I am Brian, and we have Amanda Costa, Principal, Barbara Roby Elementary School. She's going to talk a little more in depth about how data is used at the classroom and school level. I always like to present what the assessment department's mission and vision are. I just want to read this. Our mission is to provide the highest quality district assessments, data, and academic achievement information to all district staff. We will accomplish this by ensuring alignment, providing the highest quality data, and delivering the most informative measures. This is how some of the major components of our assessment program fit into the 4 pillars of our overall district mission. And the first thing I want to do is start with what we know about our state assessment results from the spring of 2021. These first 2 slides have already been presented. These are just our district's proficiency trend over the last 3 years of state data. We see represented in blue, spring 2018, the reddish, spring 2019, and then the yellowish, the most recent state data point, 2021. You can see it shows decreases across the board in proficiency, but one thing I like to highlight here is that it appears math showed a larger decrease than ELA overall. And to compare Litchfield to the state average, the state is represented in blue, Litchfield district represented in red. And again, that difference between a decrease in ELA and math can be seen here. You can see that the gaps are wider in ELA between the district and the state than they are in math. These next several slides have not been presented. So this is new data that was released by Department of Education. This is the statewide public data file where we can see other districts in the state, other schools in the state, and then a few other ways to aggregate. We just took a handful of districts. We like to take, of course, the elementary districts, our West Valley districts around us, and then a few from East Valley, inner city. And then we always like to take some of the districts that are traditionally high scoring. You can see Litchfield there in yellow, 48% proficient in ELA overall. And math, 36% proficient overall. And these next slides then look at proficiency by student group. The student groups in this slide are actually in alphabetical order on the bottom. I was supposed to group them and I somehow overlooked this one, but it's okay. I grouped them in the next set. This is ELA, but you can see the race and ethnic categories. You can see gender, low income. We have a military subgroup, which is reported, students with disabilities. There are unreported subgroups simply due to a low N count. So if the number proficient is fewer than 10 in any group, the state does not report the percent proficient for that group. So one of the most obvious here in ELA is that the English language learner subgroup is not reported. So that's not publicly available because the number of EL students that scored proficient was fewer than 10, regardless of the number tested. But in math, we can see that the number of EL students that scored proficient was 10 or more. So that is a reported group. You can see that at 5%. Some of the unreported subgroups, I'm just trying to remember them all. Homeless was one, neglected and delinquent, and migrant. Unreported. So either, well, the number scored proficient was fewer than 10, but most likely the number tested was also fewer than 10. And then my next question, of course, and something I wanted to present was, how do these student groups compare to state averages? So this is a lot of bars on this chart. These are all the reported student groups, and these are grouped in order. So you've got the ethnicities left to right, then gender, and then the needs groups for ELA. My takeaway from this is that in every reported subgroup for ELA, the Litchfield district had higher proficiency rates than the state on average. And in math, so that's the state data we have available and some of the ways that we've looked at it as it's been released to us. There is one more state data file that was released to districts that will be publicly released, but I'm not sure what the public release will look like. It's the accountability file and it will be public, but I'm not sure what will be in it. I don't have field specs for that file just yet. But right now it's not public. So now I'd like to get into district assessment results if we don't have any questions about state assessment results. But before we look at data, I think it's really important to look at the evolution of these current tests that we just took in August of 2021. Here's just a brief summary of the timeline. So August 2018, we had what I call the full battery math and reading assessments. These were on average about mid-50s in terms of the number of items. Then in the summer of 2019, after the 18-19 school year, kindergarten through 8th grade pre-post math tests went through revisions. Some of them were revised quite a bit more significantly than others, particularly in the middle school. I remember we took 7 or 8 items off of one test, replaced items with newly written items on other tests. And then we also revised the grade 2 reading assessment, but not very much. That one I think is still pretty comparable. Then in August 2019, for the 1920 school year, those revised assessments, still on average 55 items, so the full battery is what I call it, those were administered for the very first time. So we did not know how students would score on these new tests. Then, of course, March of 2020, we had the fourth quarter COVID shutdown. That summer, as we realized students probably will not come back at full capacity, in the fall of 2020, we revised those 55 item assessments to 30 items. And the way we did that was we took 30 items off of the 55 item tests. And my logic for that was I want to be able to compare as much as possible. So I want to make as few changes as possible to these items. So 30 items were taken off those items were unchanged and new tests were created. Now kids had not taken those 30 item tests before. They had taken the 30 items, but they were embedded in much larger assessments. Students did come back in person in October of 2020. Those 30 item math tests were administered for the very first time those students were taking it. And then in August 2021, we gave that same assessment again. The reason I want to go through this is because this really impacts our ability to compare year to year. So for example, last December, when I presented, one of the questions that was posed, I don't remember which member Moran or member Clymer, do we see a learning gap? At the time, the data that we had was August 2019, the full battery assessment, and October 2020, the 30-item assessment. So there were two major differences there. One, when the test was given. August was first quarter and the beginning of the first quarter. October and into November we tested, so we're now well into the second quarter. When we look at overall percentages, the percentages were higher after the fourth quarter shutdown in 1920. But the problem was we didn't know how to interpret it because we didn't know how much higher they should be. We expected them to be higher because they've already had a full quarter of instruction. We just didn't know how much higher. That was our weakness. And when the question was posed, do we see a COVID slide or a learning gap or learning loss? We didn't know. And the question was, it is not evident at this time that there is a significant learning loss. So now insert into this fall, 2021, we give the same 30-item test that were given in October of 2020, which those two are given at very different times. I did look at that comparison and I just couldn't make much sense out of it because I knew they'd be lower, but I didn't know how much lower is much lower or how much lower is where it should have been. The most comparable data that we have is from the full battery August 2019, which were the same 30 items, but embedded in a larger test. And we'll look at that data in just a couple minutes. And I will keep referring back to this timeline for sure. So planning for assessments for this year, before we look at the actual numbers, we expanded pre-post assessments to kinder first and second. So kinder first, second math and second grade reading. And then we're re-implementing these interim assessments in math and in reading in grades 3 through 8. So we have 2 interim math assessments, one actually that the window opens next week on November 1st. Then we have a winter reading, and then we have another one for math in February. The thing about the test next week when it starts, this will be the first comparable data point we've had since November of 2018. We will be able to compare this data back to how students scored in November 2018 because they're the same test taken at the same time. Except for a couple of revisions in grades 5 and 8, but pretty minimal. And then in December, we will also have the ability to do that with reading. That'll be the first time that we'll be able to see what does this difference really look like. So this is just what the assessments look like for this year. There is, and I apologize, I overlooked it. One typo under reading pre-post is actually grades 2 through 8. I fixed it on mine and I will work with Amy to see if maybe we could get it reposted, corrected. And then the mid-year benchmark in grades 3 through 8 in December. DLA does test remotely. We only bring DLA students in to test if there's some kind of a special accommodation, like the student needs to test on paper and not online. We won't send paper home for our secure assessments. Or if there's some other accommodation that cannot be provided online. So here's how the scores come out. So I want to just draw attention again to the date of the administration. Blue bar represents August of 2019, 55 items. The burnt orange is the most current data point we have, August 2021, 30 items taken from the 2019 test. And the reason I think that is so important, so if you look at kindergarten math, so kindergarten math, the vast majority of them don't have time that they're missing school the last 2 years. Majority of them, this is their first year in school. And we can see scores are right about the same, maybe even a little bit higher for our current kinders compared to kindergartners 2 years ago in math. Same test. But first grade and second grade, and I'm looking at math right now, first graders did see 1 year in kinder of remote learning for most of the year last year. Second graders saw remote learning for most of the year last year, and then a full quarter in kinder. And I do see those scores are lower. To me, that shows that compared to students coming in 2 years ago, students now entering, at least in first and second, do show lower scores. Can I say that that's due to remote learning? I can't say that conclusively, but I can say that they appear to be lower coming in this year than 2 years ago, pre-COVID. And we can see the same thing in second grade reading. Those scores are lower. So I could definitely say first and second graders appear to be entering this year lower than pre-COVID times. But I want to point this out, and this is why I keep cautioning about the changes in assessments over time and what we're trying to compare. If I look at 8th grade reading, I notice August 2021, the one we just got done taking reporting, is significantly higher than 2 years ago. When I look at the 30 items and the passages that were taken from that 2019 test, most of the 30 items were taken from the last half of the 2019 test, which was 55 items. To me, I see that as the number of items on the test having more of a significant impact than I would have expected, at least in 8th grade on this test, taken at the beginning of the school year. So are grades 3 through 8 here inflated simply due to something such as fatigue of taking a much longer test at the very beginning of the school year? Maybe, but the question is, well, how much? I don't know. 8th grade reading seems to be pretty significant. But that's why the test that opens next week is going to be a very important data point for us, because many of these variables will go away. And then, of course, let's look at it by subgroup or student group. These are in order. This is just to compare group to group in terms of the relative nature. This is overall percent correct by ethnicity. Math on the left, reading on the right there. Here by gender. And then by the 2 high end count need groups, English language learners and students with disabilities. And I'm comparing the need group to the non-need group. So English language learners in math, they're about 26% overall compared to all students that are not English language learners, about 37%. And same with disabilities. So that's the current data we have. So most recent state data point and the most recent district data point and the variations that have occurred with the evolution of the current district data point. So now I want to get into what we do with all that data, how the field gets it, how the district gets it, how we get it, and some of the reports that we make. And then, of course, Ms. Acosta is going to come up and talk to us about how she implements this data at a school level.
Brian, would you like questions kind of as we go? Or
Yeah,
do you want
sure.
us to? Okay,
Go ahead.
so I have a few questions on what you've gone over so far. So I appreciate the timeline summary and explaining the differences between where we were in 2019, the number of questions, and kind of paring that down and where we are today. But it comes across to me like we are kind of blaming the test or blaming the process for some of these differences. So are we saying that students are performing better than our data indicates, or are you saying that the data is accurate?
Well, the data is accurate in terms of how students scored. The issue comes in interpreting what the number means relative to what we know about previous numbers. So whenever I try to interpret, what does this mean? Like, are students entering, for example, this fall data point we have higher, about the same, or lower? I need to see comparable data from students in the past. So I could say, for example, students this year seem to be entering higher than students last year. So my expectation is going to be higher proficiency at the end of the year than a lower scoring group showed in the past. But with these last 3 years of just, well, I would just call kind of a broken data trail, that comparison doesn't exist. So the best use of this data that we have is what we're about to go through right now. But in terms of predicting where they're going to end up, we can't do that with this data because I don't have comparable enough data points because of just the changes that have taken place over the last 3 years.
Okay, so I understand that in that particular case, you're talking about comparable data. So we as a district and as a board have made some decisions based on data that we've been given, specifically that we had lower scores in math. So we are going to focus additional funding on math specifically. I would like to know if, in your opinion and what you're seeing in the data, that is an accurate assessment, because I know we looked at AZM2, but AZM2 also changed from the year before. So based on the state testing, as well as what you've seen on assessment so far, does that appear to be accurate, or should we really have waited or potentially hold off on some of these decisions until we have a comparable data point?
Well, no, I don't believe we should have held off. The state AZM2 data point, is a comparable data point. That the blueprints were the same, the standards were the same, performance levels descriptors were the same. They did remove some field test items from the test just to shorten it a little so students wouldn't spend a full 3 hours testing, but those should be comparable data points. So I believe from using that data, those decisions are good decisions to make. And now what we can do with this next math data point is monitor compared to students 2 years ago or pre-COVID, where are students now? And then in February, we'll be able to do that again. Are students gaining? If there's a gap, are they gaining compared to students in February, still pre-COVID shutdown in March of 2020?
Okay. My other question is about the student group information. I understand that these slides, specifically, if we talk about fall 2021 information, are just comparing the different student groups to another student group. I think it would be helpful to also see previous year information on here. For example, we looked at the overall percent correct by grade, and we looked at 2019 to 2021. Could we also see 2019 to 2021 on the other slides as well? Because while it's useful to compare or contrast one group to another, I think we also need to look at where were we and with each student group in 2019, and where are we with each student group today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so if you could, obviously I know you can't get that to us right now, but if you could potentially add that information and include that in a Friday update, I think that would be useful.
Yes, I would definitely do that.
Wonderful, thank you. That's all my questions so far.
Okay.
I got a question or two. At first, I think I was wondering why the state, why the average for math was way back at the beginning was 36%. And then I looked over at the and saw that compared to the state, it was 29. I realized I was just looking at 8th grade. So, but then that is kind of a shocking realization all of a sudden, is that the average is 36 for math, but by 8th grade, it's 29. So it kind of means, so like that 36 is, that average comes out because we got higher scores in earlier grades. I guess the peak is around 5th grade. So my concern, I'm sitting here going, wow, Like we're an education factory and the kids come in the door at kindergarten, but we're saying it's a 36 average, but in reality, the only thing that counts is what's the score of the finished product leaving in 8th grade. And it's 29%. I mean, it's like that should be the only figure, really not just averaging in one sense, because it's saying a couple of things, I think. The thing we should be focusing on most is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. If we get them up to 42%, we drop down 13 points in those 3 grades. I don't know if you want to please comment if you want to, or if you don't want to. I can understand there's nothing to say.
Well, it is seen the higher the grade level, particularly in math, the lower the proficiency. You will see that statewide. And then grade 10, of course, seems to have the lowest proficiency, even lower. But I know that we identified middle school math as one of the key focuses for that ESSER funding.
Okay. That's a good answer. Thank you. And then I have I didn't quite understand why the percentage of limited English. You said something about if there's less than 10, does that mean actually 10 students in the whole district, or 10%? Or what is that metric?
So it's an unreported group because the number that scored proficient, regardless of how many students were tested, the number that scored proficient was fewer than 10.
So essentially it's saying that statistically nobody scored proficient.
No, it's just unreported. So if you look at the state file that was reported, it'll just have an asterisk instead of a number.
Okay. So in this case here, just to give me an idea, are we talking about 1%, or are we talking about, how many students, or just a guess? I'm not going to hold you to it.
I would have to look, actually, I'd have to look at the total number tested and then have to see 10 divided by that, what is less than that? I didn't do that, but I'd have to do that to say it's less than this amount.
Well, I don't know. Do you have a wild guess?
Brian, just to expand on that question, is it 10 students for the entire district or per grade level?
For this particular slide, it is 10 students for all grades 3 through 8.
Okay, so just to go with me on this math, if there's 100 ELL students in our district in grades 3 through 8, it is unreported when less than 10 are proficient,
Yes.
no matter whether there's
So the
50
highest,
students or 100 students or 200 students.
correct.
That's irrelevant. It's just the 10. So what we're saying is it is unreported because in the Litchfield district, we did not have 10 ELL students in grades 3 through 8 who were proficient.
In ELA, correct.
Does that help, Jeremy?
It did help, Danielle.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I have just an easy one, is that when you took, you had to shorten the test, you went from 60 or 55 down to 30. Was it just, you just randomly picked it, or did you decide to pick and choose?
Yeah, the first thing we did with the grade level teams is we blueprinted the test. So we said, okay, what % of the 30 items do we want in this domain? What % in this domain? What % in this domain? And that mirrored the state assessment blueprint with the 30 items.
So you try to keep that ratio the same?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I think that
And
is-
then we looked at the items in those domains, that the standards were in those domains. And we took, in most cases, we took what seemed to be the highest correlated items from the past to the overall math or reading ELA scale scores.
I see. Okay. See, because I remember you talked about that
Oh, yeah.
almost a year ago. Okay. And then, so actually I have just, this is it. So basically, if I'm understanding it, the state does the assessment near the end of the school year, and
Yeah, April,
And then you do yours at the beginning of the school year, hoping that it's the same type of test because you want to see what happens during the year. Is that sort of the idea?
kind of. So we give that the fall and the spring, we give the test in August. Well, in a typical year, we'll give the test in August and then again after the state test at the end of April and into May. That's the same test.
Okay, so you do it right after the state test because that's where you want to get your correlation.
Correct, because
Okay.
I want response consistency to be similar so that I can
Got it.
see if students are responding similarly on the state test as they are to our test, because that'll tell me that our items are similar.
Right. Okay, thanks for the refresher course.
Sure. So I want to get into reporting our district level data. And I'll get into a couple of the common reports and then a couple what I think are really useful reports. The most commonly accessed report is this percent correct report. This gives the overall percent correct. It will color the proficiency level for each individual student and then also percent correct for each of the domains. We'll group items. So say 3 items measure this percent G or geometry. What percent of those 3 items did these students get correct? That's probably the most commonly accessed. Another commonly accessed report is this raw score report. And this is really useful because at the student level, this gives item by item information, whether the student answered the item correct or incorrect. And then we have what are called item crosswalks that crosswalk the item number to the standard it's intended to measure. So that if I wanted to pull up my class, the raw score report, I'd be able to see which standards my whole class scored high or low in. And of course, as a teacher, that would prompt me to move on a little sooner or reteach if a majority of my class didn't seem to grasp a particular standard that was taught. This is a unique report. It's called performance level report. This is unique to just what I call our district math formatives. We'll take 2 of them this year, grades 3 through 8 only. The first one begins next week, and then we have the second one middle to the end of February. This report is powerful because for each student, it will give you the answer the student chose on each item. And then you see a combination of numbers and letters here to read it. If it's a letter, it's a correct answer. If it's a number, incorrect, and the number corresponds to the letter 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. And why that's powerful is because we also have an item descriptors document. And this is just an example of an old 3rd grade item. This will give more specific information about the item. And then if when writing the item or revising the item, we put an answer in specifically to try to identify what the student may have done wrong, we can put that here. So for example, in the item description, this particular item is a word problem that asks students to round to the nearest 10th. Students may solve using addition of 3 2-digit numbers. An incorrect response of A may be due to adding only 2 of the 3 numbers, or C may be due to student rounding without adding.
Hey, Brian, can I ask a clarifying question? When you're talking about this section in these reports, you're talking about our benchmark data?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, the pre-post and then show all the district level data. So there'll be 4 math tests in grades 3 through 8, 2 in grades K2, and then 3 reading tests in grades 3 through 8, 2 in grades K2.
And what is the mechanism for teachers, administrators, whoever wants access to this information to get this? Like, how is this provided to them?
It's online in our data reporting platform. So they just go to the website and they have logins. They can just log right in. And there are just 2 major areas to go to. This particular area that I'm looking at now, going through with you, is what we call the baseline report area, but that's just for one instance of data. So AZ Merit Math Spring 2021, for example. And then there'd be another report for spring AZAC or AZ Merit Reading Spring 2021. So they could go into either one of those instances in this area and look at different data types.
Okay, so a new teacher comes in, they've never taught in our district before, and we tell them this information is available. What kind of training do we give them on how it should be interpreted, how it can be used? I know this is at your area of expertise, so the training part maybe, so I don't know if Superintendent Gunning wants to add something to that, but I'm just curious to know, how are we getting everyone on the same page with how this data is being used?
Well, some of that is just site by site. Each site has an instructional coach that plays a really valuable role in that. In a lot of cases, the instructional coach puts data together for the teachers. Some principals or coaches will ask me to come out to do staff trainings. That happens really every year. At least 1 or 2 schools will ask me to. So that's another way. But I would say the instructional coach, or depending on how familiar the principal is with getting into the system, principal would do that too. Or maybe that's a teacher that's been in the district a while, could do like a teacher leader project. I'm not sure that that actually exists, but it might. These are just resources that we train are available. They, of course, they have access to state standards documents that define standards at the state level. We have defined essential standards. We have instructional pacing guides, our assessment blueprints, our item crosswalks, and then we just looked at an example of an item level descriptor. We do have item level descriptors for the winter reading test, but it doesn't have answer specific information. It's just, that's a little more difficult with the reading responses. But what the descriptors do for that reading test is it gives them the item stem, so they know how that particular item is asked, which will let them know how that standard is being interpreted. And some other really important tools that they have, and these are just sort of the major reports that are used, the most popular. We have this other area called multiple measures. This will combine either different content areas. So for example, in the report area we're just in, if we had 2 reports, one for AZ Merit Math, one for AZ Merit Reading, in this area, we create a template to combine those. So they would just need to pull up one report to see by student, AZ Merit, Math, and Reading together. The other thing we can do is create longitudinal reports. So this is a really important report. This is just a longitudinal AZ Merit report that shows 4 years of data, if we have it, for students. And then my favorite is what I call an intervention report. These are put together at the beginning of the year when the first data point hits, which this year was in September. In September, what we do is we take that, we have all math and all reading reports that take all of the math data points in a particular year, put them together, all reading, put them together, and this just adds the current data point. This is an example of one. This is reading. So you'll see it has all data points from reading, district and state from the 2020-21 school year, fall, spring, and then AZ M2 or AZ Merit, and then our current fall data point. What I really like about this report is I just put a calculation in here to calculate a composite score, because sometimes you'll have a student that scores higher and then lower, then higher, then lower. To me, this composite score is sort of a quantitative representation of over the last 4 data points, over the last year, including the current year, how has the student scored overall? And I simply add them together. So I take the percent fall 20 plus the percent spring 21 plus the proficiency level for the state test times 4 to make that on a 100-point scale, plus the percent correct for the current fall data point. Then I can sort it. These are the lowest scoring students at this particular school and in this particular grade level in reading over the last 4 data points. When I can, I always like to use multiple data points over time. And then as you scroll down to higher composite scores, what you start to see is this speckle of other proficiency levels. I have the term borderline here. Really call these the 50-50 groups. There are 3 different 50-50 groups. These are students that are scoring partially proficient, then minimally proficient, then partially proficient, then minimally proficient. To me, on any given test, these students can score in either category. So this, I think, is, for me, would be one of the most important reports that I would use. So I'm not just looking at a single point of data when possible.
So I think that's, you're picking kids that are at a tipping point that if you give them enough of a nudge, they can maybe tip.
Well, I think they group them. So you have groups. Now, these are the lowest scoring, so they need a certain level of
Right,
support.
yeah, no, I
Yep.
understand that.
Yep. And then we have another group. These are, maybe this is more tier 2.
Right, so
Then
yeah,
tier
for that
3, yep.
particular group. And just the AZ Merit ELA, the scale score is a 4-digit number. How does that relate to the percent correct, or does it?
It doesn't. No, we use percent correct, which is just out of 100%. And then they use a raw score and convert it to a scale score. And then the proficiency levels on the state test have scale score ranges.
Okay, so they make up the scale after they get the results, kind of like SAT tests or whatever.
Yeah, they do, because sometimes a raw score will convert to a different scale score year to year.
Right.
If they see fluctuations in, well, really the difficulty of a set of items, if a smaller percentage of students answer particular items incorrectly, that might mean it's a more difficult item, which would mean the raw score to scale score conversion might adjust.
But with the AZ Merit ELA scale score, is that, there's no way to divide that by something that comes up with something? Not really.
No,
Okay.
and actually we do not, with the state test over the last, well, 6 years, 7 years, we don't get the raw scores.
I see. Okay.
You were mentioning, obviously, the more data points we can look at, the better idea we have of future behavior patterns, let's say. And I might be going into Principal Acosta's territory here, because I'm going to, like, obviously we have many more data points than this at a school level, right? I mean, they're doing things every day in the classroom. Does this system that's pulling these reports have the capability to also dig or drill down even deeper so that teachers can see on a weekly or monthly basis, not just a semester basis when these things are done, how their students are doing in order to better direct their intervention or teaching?
Not in this system. This system is just meant for consistent district-wide data. So, but Amanda is actually going to come up and talk more about that specifically.
Okay.
How they use it, getting down to the classroom level.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, can I ask one more question before we get to the classroom level? Because I'm somewhatly familiar with kind of, so it seems to me like, you know, we see these high-level reports, we're looking at the district level, and we break that down to the student level. Superintendent Gunning, can you tell me how we use campus level data to determine the distribution of resources or what schools may need more assistance?
The district level data is utilized in relation to designing their Title I plan specifically in relation to that component. I would say that's also the information that we'll be monitoring as we get closer to the end of the year when we're hiring the math specialists for next year, the interventionists to help with math, to see exactly where the needs are and how everyone is sitting at that point. Trying to think off the top of my head of different.
If I could piggyback on that. Also, John, Mr. Scudder, who's looking at the tutoring program, he and I sat down and looked at school by school data to try to see if we could figure out how best to utilize resources where.
Okay, so I hear us saying that we're going to look at those things for some of the decisions that we're making going forward. Have we historically looked at campus by campus achievement levels to determine either resources or to determine staff or principal performance or any other
We do-
factors?
We do look at campus by campus. A lot of that will also assist in when we're monitoring class sizes. So that if a campus that, let's say, may be scoring a little bit lower and maybe they have some lower class sizes where we would typically possibly collapse or do something different, we would keep them level so that they can maintain the small class sizes just for that specific response.
Okay.
School by school data is also a part of the evaluation process for principals in monitoring and seeing they set their goals at the very beginning of the year. Student achievement is a component of those goals. And then we monitor at the end to see were they able and what strategies and tactics they put in place. Did they have an effect on student achievement?
So, okay,
And then their Title I reports or plans are changed every year. They have to write a new plan every single year. So there are times that you'll see that resources change on Title I campuses based on the needs changing. One year it might be a math focus, or a couple years it might be a math focus, and then it might switch to a different reading focus or a primary grade, those types of things. So they definitely shift and make those changes.
And historically, if I could piggyback on that, we would sit down, and this is when we had comparable data year over year, and we would look school by school, grade by grade in math and in reading, and we'd identify, and I think I talked about this maybe 2 years ago, when we would do this process, we would identify hotspots. Those were areas in a grade levels in a school in math and or reading that showed students coming in or scoring during the year significantly lower than students had in the past. Then those would be on our radar. Okay, next data point, is that gap decreasing?
so do you anticipate that we would be doing that with this next test that's coming up? We'd identify
Yep.
some hotspots, and that would help us to identify where our math specialists or potentially more aides or that sort of thing should go?
Yes, I'm not sure about the staffing part, but yes, hotspots are going to be identified in math by school in 3 through 8 with this November data point, then in reading with the December data point.
Okay, and those hotspots are identified, tell me again how they're identified, like by student or by classroom or by school?
Overall grade level at each school. So what we'd be doing is looking at the average percent correct. So say November 2021 compared to November 2019, the pre-COVID. Are these students in November below, at, or above where students were pre-COVID in that same grade at that same school?
Thank you.
I got a question. It's overwhelming amount of data, but it's good. It's good. I'm getting to it a little bit, but my question is, it's sophisticated, but overall, looking at the big picture, our school district has pillars, goals, all kinds of stuff. Not a single one says improving academics. As a matter of fact, academics is usually down the low end of the totem pole. We just had a parent survey. They said they want academics at the top. And the board just a few months ago refused to even include in the superintendent's goals improving academics. So it's a culture. I've gone on tours of schools and I see games and things like that. It doesn't seem like anybody's really serious about it. They like to get up in a meeting and pretend and talk about it. But if this school adopted a culture of saying that academics is life or death for our kids, because honestly it is, and really did it, do you have any idea, comparing, looking at other schools, how that could affect our academic achievement?
I wouldn't know, but when I read the pillars and the description of them, to me, all of those things support academic achievement. I think that's all we talk about is that is the outcome.
Well, we seem to be putting all kinds of energy and resources into equity and emotional social learning and all sorts of other things. That seems to be, in all the time that I've sat here, it's what it is. And then looking in the classrooms, I'm seeing that's what I'm seeing. It doesn't seem to be that I know there are other schools out there and parents are, you know, I mean, it's a priority, but it's not even a stated goal. And I can't even understand why they voted down improving academics. And then like 2 weeks later, it came out that, you know, we're in the dumpster, you know, with the school, with the academics. It's not your fault. I'm not trying to rag on you, but it's kind of like we're trying to look at a lot of details which are important, but I think that as a district, we're missing the whole point. It is, I think, with our goals. I know you have to stand up for the school district, but our
Brian,
goals is the academic is like I don't want to go through them here. It's the last one.
I will say though, I'm the data guy. I do get blamed for everything.
Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to address that question. Of Board Member Honak. The goals that you're referring to were chosen and collaborated on and approved by the board with months and months and months of collaboration by our community, our parents, our students, and everyone throughout the district. Everyone agreed on strategically where we were going. And I would argue that the research continually shows that whether it's social emotional learning or equity or whatever, the programs that you're referencing are in support of academic excellence. We're not doing them instead of, we're doing them, everything that we do should be to increase our scores. And I think it's been shown that just teaching math or just teaching English and nothing else, the live or die that you're referencing, hasn't worked. So looking at other opportunities that we can do to help our teachers and our students collaborate better together is what we're trying to achieve. Everything that we're doing here should be to better increase our children's academic excellence. Everything. And I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I would argue that we are doing everything we can. Nobody likes the way that these scores look. Everybody wants our students to do better. And I don't know, I don't think there's an exact answer to your question, but I would just argue that research shows that these other elements are helpful in helping students achieve academically.
Well, I think the public thinks that's laughable. They're laughing at this. It's utterly ridiculous. And I presented something that is proven stuff to increase, which Mr. Owen even backed up the research on it. And then after that, Kim Moran gave the same lecture that we're doing everything perfectly and everything wonderful. And then the joke was on her when a month later, the new scores came out, because I was basing it on 56, 57. And then a few weeks later, it came out, oh my God, we got to start doing something, because it dropped down into 36 for math and 48. So keep on preaching all you want about how you're doing everything perfectly. You're not. And the first thing about solving a
No one's
problem
doing
is
everything
recognizing
perfectly.
that you have a problem. And we have a hell of a problem at this school district, and the public knows it. You can go ahead and say what you want to do. You're not convincing me, and you're not convincing them. Amen.
Mr. Honak, if you've attended any of these meetings and actually listened, you would know that I have never said that we're doing everything perfectly. And I am one of the most hopefully constructive critiques or attempt to have constructive criticism of this district, because I am in this work for the right reasons, which is for the success of the students. So if you would take the time to actually read the strategic plan and get on board with the fact that we care about academics, yes, but we care about the whole child. We care about our students feeling loved and cared for and safe and learning. And we want them to be successful in life, which academics is a piece of that, but there are many other pieces that we can help contribute to the success of those students. And that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. And
You're
we,
welcome.
we heard, I just played back some video because I have a whole lot of legal issues. And I just accidentally got on a Kim Moran speech about how correctly you did everything with equity. You went on for 5 or 10 minutes about you did everything perfectly. Well, there's a guy named the Attorney General that came out with a
Okay,
report
we are
that said
getting
that you
way
were
off
not,
topic.
and you
We're
did
getting way
not.
off topic.
Okay, so
Jeremy.
you can give all the lectures you want, and I'm a bad guy, okay. You know, but I think the public out there realizes that I'm not just blowing smoke over here. And it's not fun being ganged up all the time and being told that I'm not on the agenda and whatever. You guys you're going to find out. You've encouraged everybody. You sit there and people go yell out of the audience, call me a pedophile or whatever. And when I say something, you scold me, not them. So you know what? You can preach all you want, okay? But you know, the facts are the facts. And the public out there, they're not too dumb. They figured it out.
Let's move
evening.
on.
We'll go on with
Thank
the
you, Principal
presentation, okay?
Acosta.
Because I
Thank
want
you
to
for
go
joining
home.
us. Let's
Good
continue.
evening, members
Thank
of the
you.
board, Superintendent Gunning, members of our community, both online and here in person. As Brian said, I am Amanda Acosta. I am the very proud principal of Barbara Roby Elementary School in our Far East Valley. I'm here tonight to try to attempt to pull back the curtain, so to speak, so we can give you guys a very clear, as best I can, view of what we do as administrators back on our campus. We're going to try to attempt to shift the focus from what we do at the district level down to the site level, and even hopefully tonight we'll even talk about what's happening at the classroom level as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? I can do that. Okay. So Brian talked a little bit earlier about that assessment timeline. That's a very key document that I wait for as the school administrator, because what I do then is I take that document and then with the help of my 2 instructional coaches, we build a grade level calendar like you see here on the screen for every grade level. So that gives them a very clear timeline of what we're looking at. We look at half days, full days of in-service. We take those off because we know that that's going to decrease our instruction time on those days. We look at the school calendar and we put those key dates in there as well. And we also put in any district assessments at that point. That calendar is used for planning throughout the year. Teachers go back in. That's a current 3rd grade one right now. That's a September snapshot. And that shows where the teachers are planning their units, where they're planning their own CFAs. Like I said, we use that throughout the year, but then we also use it to reflect at the end of the year. So if we go back and our data shows that we had a particular problem with, let's just say fractions in 3rd grade, we go back to our calendar and we say, where did we maybe miss the boat with this? Maybe we didn't spend enough time with fractions. Maybe our kids came in lower and the data showed that it was lower and we didn't spend enough time there. So we use this not only to plan on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, but we also use it as a key reflection tool to go back at the end of the year to kind of retrace our steps, if you will. Another thing that we just did this year on my site, and again, these are documents that are specific to Roby, but every site pretty much does this in the similar way. They just may look a little different. What this is, it helps me track assessments at all 3 levels: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Remember, we've talked about Tier 1 being that grade level instruction. Tier 2 is a little bit more time with that grade level instruction. And then Tier 3 is I am needing something that is outside of grade level expectations. So if I'm a 2nd grader, but my math is at a 1st grade level, that's where I'm going to hit that Tier 3. So what we did this year is my team and I, we went through and we checked for alignment, if you will. So if you think about the alignment in your vehicle, when you go get that check to make sure everything is functioning properly at all different levels, I did the same thing this year with my staff. I asked them, do we have a diagnostic, a good solid diagnostic for reading? Do we have one for math? When do we administer it? When can we expect to communicate that to our parents? And we go on to Tier 2 and Tier 3. This is a work in progress document. It's something that I'm going to go back to. It's something that I'm going to reflect on at the end of this year, whether I'm using my ESSER funds to purchase a program that will help me to diagnose, especially in the area of math. We do have one that we're currently using. It goes along with the Acadians reading, but we typically only administer that at tier 3, and that is specific to my site just because of my data and the data that I was looking at, working with my team and saying, we've got to diagnose these students a little bit sooner. What do we have that's free that I can use right now? So the next thing that we do is we take this data that Ryan gives us, and I meet with every single team, every single teacher, whether she's a new or a veteran teacher, and we take a look, sometimes it's a hard look, at our current reality, because that helps me determine who my students are, where our greatest needs are, where my coaches will need to spend a lot of their coaching time, so on and so forth. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I entered this data from my teachers, and I basically said, teacher 1 has this many students well below at benchmark or above. And then I calculated, and it's hard to see on the screen there, but I calculated what percentage of my kinder population or my kinder kids are coming in at well below or below grade level. From that, I set my plans on the strategic plan. So I go off of Superintendent Gunning's, and then I drill it down to the site level. So I have very specific academic performance goals in my strategic plan. And that is available for you to view if you reach out to Superintendent Gunning. I have those percentages in there. Those were not set just by me. I bring my teachers on board with that. We take a look. This year, we were actually privileged to take a look at the data a little bit later because it did come in a little bit later. And that was actually a blessing in disguise, because when we looked at our data and we looked at specific kids that were falling well below or below grade level, I asked the teachers, who's already responding to intervention now? Who is not responding now? Who have we reached out to parents and communicated this to? So it was actually really nice to come at the table with some experience with the kiddos already. And what the teachers said is, when I asked them to review all of the data that they had from guided reading, small group, interventions at any level, how many of these kids do you feel like we can bump up if we provide that steady intervention? Then from there, the teachers gave me that number, and then we calculated that percentage. So that's how we did that by grade level. Like I said, too, this is also how I will determine my ESSER funding. Where is my greatest need? Is it in kinder? Because as you can see, that's my current data right now. That is kinders coming in. And it's hard to see, but that's a little over 60% of my kinder population coming in already well below grade level. So they've never been in school. So that leads me to create a plan with my reading specialists and my coaches alongside with my teachers to make sure that we have a very strong, intentional intervention program right from the very beginning, so that we can intervene now, and it's more prevention instead of a reaction intervention later. We also know that the data shows us that if we intervene now, we don't have to, our time increments can be much lower if it's in kinder and we catch it now than if it's a third grader that I'm trying to catch up. Looking at the data at the site level is very complicated because teachers will have several spinning wheels up in the air at the same time. This is just a snapshot, and I'm not going to go into the PLC process too much, but this is where that job embedded training is. That's where the coaching is happening. That's where the data is being tracked. It's in the PLC meetings that we have. My campus has them twice a week. We have them for ELA, and we also have them for math. The teachers come in, they start setting those desired goals. They decide how they're going to teach it, for how long, and what the assessment is going to look like. At that same time, that may go on for like a week, 2 weeks. And then at that point, they're going to administer the CFA, as we call it, and then possibly would be getting some intervention going at the same time. So it is possible that teachers have an ELA goal for tier 1 and a goal for tier 2, and they're planning both of these at the same time. And they may not be the same kids, because if I'm a kid who's already shown you that I got what I need on tier 1, I may not be in that tier 2 for reteach. I may be in enrich, pushing me a little bit further. Then I have it going on for math. So I have tier 1 going on for math and tier 2. So you can see that they have multiple plates in the air at the same time. When we talk a little bit about what those CFAs look like, I just wanted to talk briefly about what that road looks like. They are created by grade level teams. at this point, and they are guided by our district curriculum maps. We do refer to the AZAC data that Brian talked about earlier, and we rely heavily on those math formatives, especially when we are able to break them down item by item. So where Brian talked about where it shows the item descriptors, and it talked about, if they answered A, this is probably what happened if they answered B. We rely very heavily on those, not only before we start a unit to look at what those possible misconceptions and misunderstandings might be, but we also look at it on the back end as well, because that could help drive our tiers. If we have 80% of our kids answer item 1 incorrectly, and they all answered A, that might lead me to make better informed decisions about what interventions those students may need. We also start by building quarterly plans. So if you've ever looked at the list of stipends, if it says collaboration days specific to our Title I schools, oftentimes the teachers will be looking forward. It's kind of like that backwards by design. They look forward to the whole quarter. They look at how many days, how many instructional days they have, and then they will build their timeline accordingly. So we also do that on a quarterly basis. And if you see that, we call them collaboration days. We set the protocols and procedures for those CFAs. What I mean by that is if all 4 of you were teachers on my campus, I would be making sure that we all agree on what we're calling proficient by unpacking that standard, making sure we're looking at item descriptors from the state, making sure that we understand when we ask kids to be able to do this, that's highly proficient. When we ask them to do this, that's proficient. When we don't hit that on our item, then we can't say our students are proficient. So that's one of the reasons why it's very important that we collaborate and build those tests together, and we set that common proficiency level. We also set common procedures. So for instance, like I said, if you all 4 were teachers and it was a reading test, and let's say, Jeremy, you read the test and nobody else did, that could cause a discrepancy in the data. So they all sit together and they agree on the testing conditions and the proficiency levels before they even begin instruction. And then something else that we're doing this year, and again, this is new to Roby, but it may not be new to another school in our district, is we use a table of specifications. And what we do is we take CFAs that we've already created and that we feel are pretty good, but we check for the validity and the reliability of each of those items. Is it truly measuring that standard to its fullest potential? Or is it really giving us a false positive because the DOK on the test may not meet the depth of knowledge on the state assessment? Or maybe we're not providing enough variety in our assessments, like the state test where they have the online, I believe, has like a drag and drop or a part A, part B. If we never expose our students to that, they may not be getting to that level that they're going to see, or that level of complexity on the items that they're going to see with the state assessments. So this is a new process for us this year. Again, this is my 3rd year, but I have had to move a little bit slower than expected with this since my first year at Roby in 2019. But it is something, again, that other campuses have already moved to in the years prior. This is a data sheet we call ADDIE, and it's an acronym. And what I have my teachers doing here, and I think this is, I believe this is 4th grade. I have the teachers listing the standard up at the top. And of course, they give the assessment a name, a very specific name, so they can kind of track that data over time. They set their protocols and their proficiencies. And then I've redacted the information on the left-hand side where you see that black area, that's where the student names would be. And then anything in green, the student did very well on. And we have this broken down by item. So when the teams come back into PLC and we're analyzing that data, we can take a look at item by item. And we ensure that every single item is aligned to that standard. And sometimes we have to do this because some of the assessments that come with some of our current materials are not as good as they could be. So we make them better. The other thing that you see there is you see that long area that is highlighted in red. That's a reteach score. So once our teachers provide intervention, they come back into this wall and enter a reteach score. It may also be that they're changing it in the grade book as well. Because you'll notice on the other 2 columns, there is no reteach score yet. It could be because reteaching is still going on, but it also could be that the teacher simply forgot to put that in because she's changed the grade in the grade book. The data tracking doesn't stop there. This is a snapshot of what we do at tier 2. So this is like, again, the information on the left underneath the black covering there are names that have been redacted. But then we have the individual assessments broken down by scores and tasks. The tasks are specific. In this one, it's reading. There are specific skills that the students have, and they are being tested to find out where is the point of intervention? Where is that needed? And then on the far right-hand side where you see that arrow, that is where my reading specialist and her team track their data. So they had 3 cycles already. We sit down as a team and we say, okay, so is Johnny growing? Because we identified him as a concern at the beginning of the year. Is he growing? He's had 3 cycles of intervention. If he is not, then our team moves forward with what are the next plans, and maybe unpacking, is it the right intervention? Do we need to change the intervention? Do we need to give him some more time? Those are all the questions that we ask when we see the data either flatlining, but then also too, when we see it improving, which is what we are noticing on my particular campus, those are cause for celebrations. And we know that what we're doing in class, what the teachers are doing in tandem with their coaches and the reading specialists is working. That the children are responding to the interventions. I want to add to that, some of the students may be in this level of intervention specifically for reading, because we do not have math specialists at this point on the campus. They may be here for a couple years. It just depends on their growth and how quickly they move through it. And then, of course, the data, again, doesn't stop there. The teachers are tracking the data at the classroom level. Some fun things, very interesting things that are going on around campuses are student data portfolios, which I understand that some of you have been able to visit some of my colleagues' campuses and you've seen that. And then we also have some campuses like myself using teacher data binders, where the teachers are keeping work samples, they keep their CFAs, they're analyzing student work, looking for those misconceptions, misunderstandings, and then adjusting their instruction accordingly. There are a lot of classrooms out there that are having students set their own goals for learning. And we know through Hattie's research that really is what moves the needle for a lot of our kids, is when they are responsible for setting their own goals and then tracking their own progress. It's very meaningful for them. And then, of course, we're teaching kids across this district what it means to be proficient and the difference between maybe highly proficient and proficient. These are just 2 screenshots. One is a proficiency descriptor that is actually being shared with parents tonight during parent-teacher conferences. It's giving our parents an opportunity to ask questions about that. Students have been talking about that. The far right-hand side is a chart right out of my 2nd grade classroom, where even a 2nd grade teacher is teaching kids that during their level of instruction for that particular day, they might be working on skills that will help them be proficient. But then as they go through the next couple of days, they would be given that opportunity to show that they're highly proficient. She also uses it at the end of lessons to ask kids, how do you think you did today? And so she's introducing those terms every day in her classroom. This concludes what I have for you today. I hope that this was helpful. And then I invite those of you that are coming to out to the showcases to talk with each of the administrators. Because like I said, some of this is just is specific to Roby, but we're all doing it and just looks a little bit different campus by campus. Any questions for myself or Brian?
I just have one really quick question. I'm sorry, Jeremy.
You can go ahead.
We saw in some of Brian's data that he showed that, and I think Jeremy mentioned it, like there's some peaks and valleys. So let's say in the 5th grade, students did really well in ELA in this particular year. Maybe it might change the next year. Is there any examination at the school level? So if you're seeing that same data on your campus, that 5th grade did really well, are you, as they move on, like, are you going to those teachers to figure out, like, something obviously was different that happened at that time period? How do you work that into your PLC process? Because they're not current students anymore. Or maybe 5th grade is hard because they're going to a different school probably, but if it's earlier on, those kids are going on and they're not showing that same level of proficiency as they move up. So how do you deconstruct that information, get what was happening maybe in that one snapshot of time? Is that possible?
It is. Sometimes if I notice, let's say it's a particular teacher and I've noticed over time, and again, I've only been there 3 years, but I can even track data if I ask Brian to provide that teacher by teacher. If I notice that I have a very, very strong teacher that may be extremely talented in the area of math, I will ask her to share out to different members of our faculty, either in PLCs, in our in-service days, or I will ask her to share something out, whether it's a video or a resource that she has. This year, our teachers have been allowed to go visit each other. I put them in cohorts and they've been allowed to go and glean from each other glean from others that may not be in their grade level. That's one thing. The other thing I tend to do too is I go in and look at other data, such as attendance. That is a big indicator for me. The more they're in school, obviously, the more that they were able to capture some of that instruction in the classroom and do fairly well. And like I said, too, the other thing I do is, again, highlighting some of those teachers and best practices and then trying to embed them school-wide. So this year, I've asked teachers to collect that data on the students and do a little bit more with it than I have asked them in the past. Setting goals this year on our strategic plan was something that we did this year, and having the kids set that goal, because again, one particular teacher that had amazing results, high coefficient, I asked her to share out along with another. And then what we do is we come back and say, what did you guys notice that they did in the class? They set the goals with the students and look at how much they improved. When we see data like that, it becomes a school-wide initiative.
Yeah,
and
that's
not just
great.
something that's shared out in a staff meeting or an in-service.
Right. Interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I was very interested. When you got to the student data portfolios and you said you do more of the teacher data binders.
I do.
Is your school goes to K6 or K5 or
No,
K8?
sir, it's pre-K through 5th grade.
Through 5th year. Okay, so classic elementary, I guess.
Correct.
Okay, and so what really caught me was students setting their own goals for learning. So do you find that effective?
Very effective.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And in speaking specifically about 5th grade, the one particular teacher that I'm thinking about right now had a growth coefficient that exceeded her peers. A lot of that was good teaching, obviously. It was the implementation of CFAs consistently, but it was getting her kids involved in setting their goals and tracking their data.
Can I applaud? Because that's thrilling. I think that's awesome. And I think that's what, I think that's a key to kids, that they know that they're determining their future, and instead of happy faces and stuff, they really need to be exposed to that they're determining something. They're going to be at a point where they don't have school and they don't have parents, they don't have whatever, and the things they do are incredibly important. So going to stretch this out a little bit. Are you able to reach out to parents to expand the student, so the parents get involved in setting the goals, and if you do, and how, what do you see are the limitations? What are the ways you can do that effectively, easily, and what are the things that are the obstacles?
I think it's happening right now. Right now, as we speak, and conferences are taking place across all 17 campuses. When the students are encouraged to attend that conference, they're encouraged to share their data with their parents. They're sharing their goals with their parents. That brings our parents along as well.
Okay, and so you're basically not directly going to parents so much, but as you're using. You're getting the kids amped up with the goals and to the point that they really want to share it with their parents.
You know what? Let me go back. Last year we did, the year before, pre-COVID, we did a family Title I night on my campus, and we brought in parents and we actually showed them what mathematical instruction looks like in the classroom, and then how they can support at home. So we did bring parents in.
And how'd that go?
It went very well. We had the highest turnover, or we had the highest turnout, sorry, that Roby has ever seen as far as parents participating in after-school events like that.
See, I think that's the key. And I've always felt like that Title I parents are the ones that have a lot of times the least opportunities. You know, they all have to work and everything. And when they see, but they have the same desire for their kids. I mean,
Absolutely.
honestly, people do. So when they see an opportunity like that, and I think that's just an incredibly untapped, I applaud you completely, 100%. I mean, because the schools can't do it. They want to think they can and do all the social, emotional, whatever. But
The other thing we did is we took a look at our parent surveys, and our parents told us that they wanted to hear more from our teachers and provide timely updates on the progress that their child was making. So we set that as a goal, and we decided to update them quarterly on things like the AZAC scores, on how their child was doing in reading, whether they were showing growth or not. We shared that with them. And what we actually improved when we did our surveys the following year, our score had doubled our goal. We doubled in that area. So
awesome. Amen.
and the teacher is one of the steps in increasing that parent satisfaction percentage was weekly emails from the teachers, not just to say, hi, how's it going? Here's the fun stuff we're doing in class, but they break it down by reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. And they're very specific about what standards they're teaching. They talk to the parents about the CFA and if they're administering it Thursday or Friday, and to be asking their child to be discussing the results with their children. So they are very aware of what we're covering as far as standards, what from 1 week to the next.
I'd be honored if I could spend some time with you, you know, just at your school, and just I would like to talk some
Absolutely.
things. Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any questions? I actually do. I'd like to hear a little bit more about, or talk a little bit more, maybe have a discussion about CFAs. So I have so far this year had the privilege of going to El Thomas Hex campus as well as Rancho Santa Fe's campus, and obviously hearing very similar story from you tonight on what you're doing at Barbara Roby as far as CFAs and how that goes into the PLC process. So as a board member right now, I'm trying to process how all of these pieces of data are used. So we have the annual state standard test snapshot, which is a point in time. We have the district assessments, which are 3 or 4 points in time throughout the year. But it seems to me that the CFAs are really the key to all of this. So I hear you saying that some CFAs have been shown to be more or less effective than others, and that grade levels and teachers specifically are creating these CFAs. What are we doing to share data, meaning the CFAs, amongst our campuses? Because some people have been doing this process longer and might have some best practices. I know that Wonders has some CFAs built into it, but I'm wondering what we can do, like you're illustrating how you have a teacher who is showing higher than average growth, and you want that teacher to share what he or she is doing to achieve that. What are we doing right now, campus to campus, on CFAs and best practices? Which you may not know the answer, Principal Acosta, but maybe Jody does.
I know of it in terms of the colleagues that I have no problem reaching out to. So for instance, all of the Title I campuses have come together to look at some of their data and to talk specifically about resources. That is what drove me on my Title I comprehensive needs assessment to advocate for another instructional coach that would be specifically focusing on Tier 2, because I knew that I had a higher number, after talking with my colleagues, I had a higher number of new teachers on my campus than my sister campuses. So I knew training was going to be key, coaching was going to be key. So that is one way that we do that. We are clustered together to be able, because we have similar needs, and we talk about similar, like what resources we have. We also share out in our lead meetings, in our admin council meetings, again, different resources, strategies, techniques. Sometimes somebody is asked to spotlight if, for instance, Superintendent Gunning notices something on one campus that the rest of us would benefit from, she will invite that individual to share during those meetings. And then we can follow up specifically and visit that campus, send our coaches over. It's not uncommon for one coach to go visit another campus to be able to glean some of those ideas.
Okay, so specific to CFAs though, so my understanding is it would be, we're teaching the same standards at all the campuses, depending on the grade level. But it looks to me like individual campuses are coming up with their own. I guess my question is really, is there a way that we can standardize that process or put together a database that has those so that we can, first of all, potentially give some of the teachers fresh ideas that they might not be exposed to, and then impact the students in that way as well? Because one of the other things that we're hearing is everyone is stretched extremely thin, which I sympathize with. We all feel that as parents, as teachers, as board members, as anyone that's working anywhere really at this point feels the burnout, feels like we are doing more, we're being asked to do more than we can actually accomplish. So is there a way to make the CFA process easier for teachers so that they aren't coming up with these ideas or trying to reinvent the wheel with that?
I know that that has been a topic for quite a while. So in my years prior to becoming the administrator at Roby, I was an instructional coach for 6 years, and two of those years was a district coach. So I got to see how everybody was operating at the different campuses. That was one of the things that we did always talk about. How do we all share those CFAs? And at one point, we even discussed maybe sending them all in and creating like a database of our own. We are hopeful that now with the adoption of Wonders, and potentially a new math curriculum, that would all kind of get on the same page again, and that would all help us align our CFAs. So we are hopeful that we are able to do that. And a couple of years back too, we were able to purchase Gold Book you might recall that we purchased that. We were able to download some of those resources, and so we continue to use that. And not all of the CFAs are misaligned, but we are always coming in and checking. And a big part of that is teacher training. A teacher needs to be able to know her standards. A teacher needs to be able to unpack that to say, what knowledge and skills am I going to need to teach for my students to be able to master that? Teachers need to be able to come in and use those instruments like those item specifications and those item descriptors from the State Department that says, this is how it's going to be tested, and this is what your kids are going to have to do. Make that match. That CFA should match and it should align. Until the pandemic, a lot of the data that Brian would provide us was aligned, and we could say that if a student had achieved a certain level on one of our district's assessments, that we could be certain that they were probably going to achieve that on the state. That's a little bit different now, not much, but a little bit different, as Brian was alluding to earlier, because of the pandemic and the learning loss, if you will, that has taken place.
Okay, thank you.
Quickly before we wrap up, and I know we have another presentation after this, Jody, can you give us a brief update on, I know your team is investigating an additional district-wide data system that actually might alleviate some of those problems, because I know that you were talking about having banks of questions and that kind of thing to alleviate some of the teachers having to do that. I know we're still in the procurement process, but if you want to give us a quick update of where we are.
Yes, so Brian's in the process. I don't know if Brian, you want to give an actual update of where you are in the process for.
Thank you, Amanda. We really appreciate it.
A little bit of what we're looking for.
Sure, with a new assessment data platform.
Yes.
We are looking right now, some of them that we've looked at, actually, they're all pretty similar. There's one that I really like, but I'm not sure what we would choose moving forward, but they all have the capability of creating classroom assessments. So they all have item banks. Right now, our items, we create most of them in-house. And we have created most of them over the last, I'm gonna say about 11 years or so since we've started doing this online and with math formatives. They all have items that we can choose from, pre-canned assessments that we could choose from, which probably where we would start if we were to bring on something for next year. Start with those and do item selection, create all new tests for next year, which again is going to cause a comparability issue for us. We would have district level control where we could block items, and then the teachers and sites would have site level control where they can create their own assessments out of the same item bank. So at that point, we would already have a central bank of items that if we wanted to create CFAs for the schools and say, here's your test window, all the schools take this test during this window, we would have for that ability.
Okay, and Jody, remind me the timeline. This is decision-making next year, calendar year, and then being in place by the end of the school year or into the summer? Or maybe Brian, you know that, I'm not sure.
I don't know exactly when you were planning to finalize it, your decision. I thought it was like by January.
Well, I don't know. We need to get quotes first and then look at them and see what would be most plausible. Ideally, if we could start implementing something in January this school year, that would be the best to go full implementation of at least some content for next August. Because we'll need some time for things like training, and we'll have to be trained, and then we'll have to train people how to use it.
Agreed. Thank you. We look forward to it. Hopefully you can get that in place. Thank you for everything. If there's no more questions, Amanda, Brian, appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 1C, the compensation discussion for student transporters. Looks like Megan, Nathan, Monica, there might be a couple of different people. I'm not sure who's going to start.
Good evening, members of the board. Superintendent Gunning. Putting forward the Litchfield Elementary School District Compensation Study, student transporters, and in brackets, bus drivers. Presenters are myself, Nathan White, the Director of Transportation, Monica Saunders, Director of Human Resources, and Megan Duplain, Executive Director of Student Services. Transportation Department staffing. As you can see on the slide, we have current employees, which would be student transporters, bus drivers, 35. We have monitors, which are bus aides, 16 positions. We have 0 transportation supervisor at the moment. We have 1 dispatcher, and we have 3 mechanic positions. New hires, we have 5 new hires. 3 of the new hires are in training. We have 1, and when I say in training, I'm talking about student transporters in training. We have 1 new bus aide or monitor. New hires for transportation supervisor, 0. Dispatcher, 0, and mechanic, 0. Current openings, we have 15 student transporters, 11 monitors, 1 transportation supervisor, 0 dispatcher, and 1 mechanic. Recruitment. The publicity has gone on the district website. Support staff job fair, which was held on September the 18th. We had a bus driver job fair on October the 4th, 5th, and 6th. It was advertised in the West Valley ads and media interviews. Recruitment continued. Letters to staff, families and community, school communications, newsletters, social media, peach jar flyers, teacher weekly blasts, Litchfield Elementary School District social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Verado e-blast, which was 11,300 emails. Retention. All staff retention Skyping, December 2021. Bus drivers, $350 US. Offering an additional $2 Skyping for bus drivers ends May the 20th, 2022. Compensation study, student transporters, bus drivers.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. In this next, I'm going to review with you the results of our compensation study. So the purpose of our study was to review other district salary charts and benefits to stay competitive. We looked at 7 surrounding elementary districts, 3 unified districts, and 2 high school districts. These are all, once again, surrounding districts to ours. Our work aligned with these 3 pillars: student success, to provide high quality services to all students; for people, recruit and continuously develop high quality employees; maintain high retention rate of employees; and then service, provide efficient and effective customer service to all stakeholders. Who is impacted? 35 bus drivers, as we know. 3,221 general ed students ride daily on average. 372 students with special needs ride our buses daily on average. And of course, our community, probably most especially our working families who are having to figure out getting their children to school, to and from school. How does this impact students or student success? So attracting and retaining staff ensures reliable transportation of our students to and from school. Middle school sports have been impacted, as well as field trips. This is some salary chart comparison information for bus drivers only. So as you can tell, for Litchfield, we are currently paying an entry rate of $18.30 an hour. That does include the $2 temporary stipend that's in place until May. So without that, we are currently at $16.30. Trainee rate is at $12.15 for Litchfield. Of the 12 districts that we looked at on their placement charts, the lowest paying district is paying $13.97 an hour. That is an elementary district. It does happen to be a district with only 8 bus drivers. The median salary of the study is at $17 entry rate of pay for bus drivers. The average of the 12 came out to $17.34, and then the highest is $20.01, and that's a high school district and a unified district that has reached that $20.01 level. One is $20, one is $20.01. The trainee rate, you'll see that the lowest is $12.15, median is $13.38, average is $14.10, and the highest is $17. So in looking at this is definitely something to consider when having discussions around bus driver pay for Litchfield bus drivers. On this slide, you'll see how we compare to all the other districts that we looked at. Litchfield does cover and pay for medical benefits. We don't pay for dental, and we do pay a $15,000 life policy. Other districts, you'll see that 12 of them do offer medical. There are none that they all offer medical. For dental, 10 offer dental and 2 do not. And for life, 11 offer life, but 1 does not. All right, next is Megan. She's going to review some additional information.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening, Superintendent Gunning, members of the governing board. Tonight, I would like to tell you a little bit about the feedback summary we received from our student transporters. We asked them to provide feedback on a few different things. One of the questions was, what is important for you to feel appreciated as a student transporter at LESD? Is it a pay increase? And if so, what is that pay increase that you would recommend? Is it benefits? Currently we are offering medical and life. Is adding dental important to you? And then we asked for any other ideas that they could recommend that would help them feel appreciated and satisfied in their position here at LESD. I'm going to summarize some of the feedback that we got. First of all, 38 student transporters submitted information. 95% of the student transporters are currently looking for between $2 and $4 an hour pay increase. And they said that a pay increase was very important for them to feel appreciated here in our district. 21% said a pay increase only, and 5% said benefits as well. 5% said benefits only. 74% said pay increase and benefits. So breaking that down a little bit more, when we asked them specifically, what are you looking for? What would make you feel satisfied or help you feel satisfied and appreciated here? Get my other sheet that I actually wrote it down because the graph I have is a little bit cut off. 14% said $2 an additional an hour. 28% said $3 an hour an additional $3 an hour, excuse me. 5% said between $3 and $4, and 3% said $4. Some additional recommendations that some people put in there when we asked, what else do you want besides, what else would help you feel appreciated here at our district? Somebody mentioned something to boost morale, to feel appreciated. Another person said bidding for routes should go to my seniority. Another recommendation was offering full-time driving positions, 12 months positions. Someone else gave a suggestion of adding a bonus when someone recruits a driver to come to our LESD family. Another one said pay should be competitive with districts. Another person said need air conditioning for drivers in older buses. Another one said a suggestion box so employees can put out more ideas on an ongoing basis. A returning bonus annually if they choose to return to us every year. Adding vision on top of dental and spouse health care. Another person said trainers should get paid more and be a 12-month position. We have a few trainers in our district that provide, as we know, when people are hired, they require at least a 4 to 5 week training. That's right, Nathan, right? 4 to 5 weeks. Okay. And we have a few that specifically do that training in-house. And someone recommended that those trainers should be compensated more and have a 12-month position. Another person asked for hourly work available before and after the shift, additional holiday pay, and then staff should get the full $500 bonus and not prorated. So those were all the different recommendations that our staff had, and they submitted when we asked them what else besides pay and benefits to make sure that we were listening and hearing our student transporters.
Hey, Megan, before you go on, you said $500 bonus not prorated.
Yes.
Remind me what the determination of proration, I don't remember the details of that. Can you
Yes. So
help
in
me?
December of 2021, for all full-time employees, they will receive a $500 stipend. And then depending on your full-time equivalent will depend on what percentage of that 500 would be.
So if you're part-time or you have
Right.
less hours, then you would receive pro. Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense.
And so in the presentation that Monica presented, or Nathan, excuse me, student transporters are $350 stipend. And that's right, Wendy, right? I explained that accurately. Okay. So from this point, we will take all the information that was presented tonight from the salary study, the feedback from our student transporters, along with any feedback from the governing board to make a recommendation, to bring back a recommendation on November 9th, which is in 2 weeks, for action on the governing board, from the governing board.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
So all this information is just for our bus drivers, correct? This has nothing to do with our monitors.
Yes, so right now, this is student transporters, but Superintendent Gunning, do you want to talk the timeline for all of our classified positions?
So we're working right now on a classified salary survey. We just expedited this one internally. But we're working on it for all of classified because we need to bring something to you in December as minimum wage changes in January so that we don't have compression. We want to be able to minimize that. So we want to be able to, it's a perfect time to do a salary survey to see where we're sitting and are we competitive in all of our classified staff.
Okay, but it did seem like when we had a lot of people come last month and talk, it wasn't just our bus drivers that were concerned, it was our monitors as well. And we had people talk about how when monitors are hired, they are considered equal to bus drivers, but we're not treating them that way right now. So I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't just talk about both those right now.
Because then you would also have your classified staff at the schools that are supporting children and supporting in the behavior classes and in the special needs classes as well. So we felt like we needed to look at all of them together.
Okay, can you tell me, as a bus driver, can you drive a bus without a monitor being on the bus?
Yes, so our monitors are for our special needs routes, and we have always had the level of supervision on our bus for all of our special needs buses prior to this year when we are significantly lower in our monitors. So right now, what Special Ed Director McComb is working with her team on is ensuring that if a child needs a monitor on their bus, that it is incorporated into their IEP. But prior to this year, to this staff shortage, we have provided that level of service on every special needs route. But legally, we only are required to do it if the IEP team determines for safety that we have to have that on the bus.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying.
Mhm.
I'm going to agree with Melissa that I think the dire situation seems to be equally as important with monitors as it does with bus drivers right now. And I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of we're going to be reviewing everybody, but bus drivers are also classified employees. So if we're going to pull out one section, why wouldn't we just do both of them at the same time within the same department so that we can get a really good idea of what that budget impact is going to be overall? Because I'm assuming that's probably what we'll talk about next, right? Is, okay, we see these numbers, we know, or I would agree that they need to go up to be more relative to our sister districts and to be competitive. But it's hard to know that impact if we don't have all of the information. And I think monitors are a big part of that, it seems like.
I have a question or two that I think maybe would be for directed more to Nathan and I'm sorry.
Monica?
Yeah, Monica, I'm sorry, Monica, I know you completely just slipped my mind. you have down current employees for student transport 35, and then 5 are new hires. So are they, why are they not just the same as drivers? Are they're less, you have to give them less routes, or what's up with that? And then 3 in training, are they getting their CDL from you or just?
Yes, some of the new hires in training, they have certain certifications, but they need just refreshers. I
Okay,
have 2 that need.
you're not ready to
refreshers.
let them go out and
Yeah,
wreck a
once
bus.
they get
Okay.
the refresher training, they'll be just
Yeah,
put into route straight away.
okay, that answers that. And then and so basically, does it sound like you got 3, 4 people maybe that are spending a lot of time training, right?
Yeah, there will be.
Okay, so you're actually losing a driver with a trainer, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then are the trainers special people, or are they just more experienced drivers?
The trainers have DPS certifications to train.
Oh, they do. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay, and then the next question, and maybe that's why I was thinking of Monica and you, Nathan. But the thing about the stipends. So when you were describing it, Monica, you were saying, well, the actual salary is 1630, and I just have questions about the stipend. Maybe I'm naive, but it sounds to me that it's a little insulting, because it's sort of like their salary isn't 1830, because it isn't. It's 1630. You're spending the money, but you're not really getting the benefit of the employee feel like they're getting paid, because the stipend is either temporary or could go away, or you don't really deserve it as a salary, that kind of a thing. So I'm just thinking that psychologically, you're not getting the bang for the buck. Does that sound about right?
Yes. If I don't answer you completely, I'll get Monica up here.
Well,
Okay, Jeremy?
because I'm also interested in Monica, because she says she's like HR. I mean,
Right.
she deals with it all the time.
I can talk to you about the stipend though. So we knew we had an urgent need when we got our ESSER 3 money, and we wanted to address the urgent need of getting them more money immediately, knowing that we had to do a salary study and a comparison to make it long-term.
I get it. So you couldn't just bump up the salary. That's the only way you get the money to them.
Right. So,
Okay.
right.
Okay,
Exactly.
so does everybody kind of agree that when we do this, probably we want to work on the salary?
100%.
Okay, good. Okay, so that clears that one up. And then the trainee. So the trainee is making right now $12 and versus 18. And are these people, if somebody just shows up and they've got just a driver's license, no CDL, nothing, can they just say, yeah, I want to be a bus driver, and you're going to teach them all the way like Swift truck driver company does, or not?
Yeah, correct.
I see.
Just the same.
So it's actually, and how long is that process?
It depends. It can take up to 5 to 6 weeks sometimes.
I
If
see.
it's just a driver with a normal car license, it can take about 5 to 6 weeks.
And so they end up with a CDL license.
Yeah, all the school bus certifications and everything else.
I see. And is that CDL license applicable to drive an 18-wheeler, or is that a different one?
No, because the class is, an 18-wheeler is a class A
Okay,
CDL, and what the school bus is a class B
okay.
with certain endorsements, passenger transport and school bus endorsements.
I see. So when somebody comes in as a trainee, do they have to sign a contract, say they're going to drive for you for a while, or could they just, after 6 weeks, get their CDL and say goodbye, I'm going to go work somewhere else?
Well, we don't have a contract, and to be quite honest, yes, if I'll be honest. And
So
that's in
they
every
could
district.
potentially do that.
Yeah, they could. They
Does that
could.
happen?
In the state, in every other district as well as this, yeah, it could possibly.
It's possible,
Could
but it's not a
possibly.
big
Yeah, possible.
problem.
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. So but probably if you you raise the trainee rate, you're hurting yourself for 5 to 6 weeks, because you're taking away another person. It's kind of a tough balance, because it's a pill you got to take if you want to get more drivers, right?
Well, Yeah,
Yeah.
to an extent.
So I mean, I don't know whether do you have a lot of attrition or people quitting, or would you be, would the money be more spent, may not make people happy, but if you raise the trainee rate up, is that the bottleneck, is getting enough trainees, or is it retention pretty much?
I'd say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, okay, kind of balance out.
But we want to attract more people to us, and that initial training rate might not do that. But
Right.
we also want to maintain our amazing transporters that have been with us or that we value. So we have to look at then the salary there as well. So it's
Right.
It's both.
But if you get somebody to come in as a trainee and if they stick with you for a year, even if they only stick with you for a year, you're ahead, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then presumably that CDL would be something if they wanted to go on to another level of truck driving wouldn't hurt, would it? Would help? Not
No,
much.
that would be the entry level in, to be honest. With
Yeah.
you. You'd have to get some more endorsements, but it would definitely help.
Okay, yeah, okay, I don't want to monopolize the thing here, but it seems like, I was just looking at the ad. Now I lost it because I clicked something. Oh, here we go. Is the ads up at the top of this? Scrolling up. So. Yeah,
While Jeremy's looking, can I ask a really quick question? This will be information we need later, but if you guys are looking at giving them the full $500 stipend, I would want to know how much it would be if we just did that across the board. Like, what if we just did that across the board? Because if we do that for our drivers, and then we possibly consider that for our monitors too, if we're talking about doing both things at the same time, I think we'd have to just know what that cost would be if we did that across the board for all staff, just from knowledge, information.
I found the ad and I didn't want to take away. Are you done, Melissa? Yeah. But I just looking at the ad and just the advertising part of me says, it says bus drivers wanted is like free CDL training, because maybe a lot of young people that are just sitting around in their, parents' houses, that are, need to go do some work, or something like that, might just sort of go like, hey, that's a gig. And they may want to stick around for a while, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So I'm just saying from the marketing standpoint, I think you have a lever to pull in terms of bragging about, hey, we'll train you, for free, and the bus driving is secondary, because I know people don't go work for Swift for the pay. I think they work there. I think you got to sign a contract at Swift.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
They're not putting you through your CDLA for nothing.
Yeah, you get paid nothing, but you get your ticket. But here you're giving them the ticket. I would alter some advertising, honestly, because I think there are a lot of kids sitting around the parents' houses that need to get out and do some work.
I'd like to make a request for further information as we move into kind of the change approval process for the next meeting. I think obviously the total budget impact for an increase, student transporters, I would like to see the 1950 range, what that looks like, just in comparison to the numbers I'm seeing here. A trainee rate of at least $14 an hour. It might go up from there. I'll let you kind of make that recommendation. Also, I'd like to see what our monitors are currently making. And, I really do agree with Melissa that we should do these in tandem, and at least be able to see the total budget impact of what this is on the transportation department, not just from one category to the other. I am sensitive to the fact that we will be doing this a couple of months in a row. So I do understand that there is some lag time there for the rest of our classified staff, but it's important to me at least to be able to see that global figure in transportation. I think it is I don't have a comment on the health benefits, and I know, Monica, your staff, you work really hard on, making sure that all of that is put together, and it doesn't sound like that was the top priority in terms of the staffing, but I'm open to hearing what those costs might be, or it seems like many other districts are offering that in terms of dental, so I'm open to looking at or hearing what those costs might be based on the staff that we have and growing. I agree with Melissa that just to sort of reiterate, I know we've already approved the stipend, but if we could just see again what that looks like across the board, how many people that affects. And I know we have some very specific criteria, and Megan, I'm just looking at you because I know you know a lot about the ESSER funds. I know we have some specific criteria within that we can give out in terms of stipends. So depending on what this budget impact is, maybe there is some additional, whether it's a retention bonus or a sign-on bonus or something else that we can do if in fact we're not able to reach the hourly rate that we want. I think we can get here, but I mean, if for some reason we can't, are there other forms of, that we can continue to increase those things to help retain the drivers that we have that are currently working really hard and right now working double and triple routes to try and keep up for us? How do we make sure that we retain them and then, allow them to stay with us through the rest of the year? I think that's it for my requests.
Can I clarify? Can I go back through those really fast?
Absolutely.
Make sure that I wrote them down.
Mhm.
The impact of raising the entry rate from between 19 and 1950.
Correct.
And what did you say for the training?
Trainee rate, at least $14 at a minimum. If you want to do increments from there, that would be fine.
And then the impact of the retention bonus for all monitors, what our current monitors are making, and the cost for dental and vision, and possible additional bonuses and what those costs would be.
Sure. And I think that, I don't know if we need to do the stipend we're doing now and another one, but maybe combining or just looking at if we can't reach these. I don't know that all those things need to be individual, but collectively, what could the whole package look like?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did-
Anyone else? That's just my
Yes.
opinion. Please, everyone
Yeah.
else jump into that.
I have some questions. Monica, on the additional other district information that we received, can you provide me some clarification as to what is the salary cap? Why do we have a salary cap, but no other districts do? What's the difference between the max hourly rate and the salary cap?
So you're correct. The information I provided does confirm that some districts do not. I don't really have an explanation for that. I just know that Litchfield has always had salary caps. I know that each year, maybe there are 2 or 3 classified staff members that are impacted by that because we do continuously increase the cap. So the impact is not as great there, but certainly something to consider when we are doing this work and considering our charts for next year, or even corrections effective January.
Okay, so what's the difference between, is it just terminology where we're saying our max hourly rate is less than $1 from our entry level hourly rate, whereas other districts, their max hourly rate looks to be almost double what their entry level rate is?
Yes, so when I arrived, there are formulas in place for our step placements. And so again, they are going to vary from district to district. For example, some districts, some have salary charts just with an entry level salary. Some have step-based charts. Some pay maybe 25 cents for every year at with a max of $2.50. They're kind of really all over the place. I know that one district just is undergoing a study, and they're actually introducing steps they didn't used to have in their charts. So I think they're going up to 13 steps on their chart. So again, I think it's just district preference. And so, definitely something to take back and maybe have conversations with our finance office on.
Okay, so when I look at this and it says max hourly rate and there's a dollar amount there, Tell me what that means.
So typically that is going to be, or that is actually going to be based on the chart that the district had. So for example, for us, the highest salary on a classified hourly chart goes up to step 6. And so that would be the hourly rate for step 6, max salary, because that is max salary placement, unless a salary exception is reviewed by Superintendent Gunning and approved by the board. So so that would be like the highest step on a chart.
So
As a
we have a
starting point.
66-cent step. That's all we have in our district.
Correct. You mean for each year, how it's not as significant as others?
Well, I
Are
don't
you
know.
referring to
What
that?
I'm trying to do is compare apples to apples. So I see our district here and I see that we have an entry-level hourly rate, we have a max hourly rate, and we have a salary cap. No other districts have a salary cap that we're comparing to.
Correct.
So I'm trying to see what is the entry-level rate? How do I compare the two columns for everyone else that's entry-level hourly rate and max hourly rate when ours doesn't seem to make sense with what everyone else is doing?
So the entry level rate for ours is actually 1630 right now on that salary
I
chart.
understand that.
That was approved last year. Does that make sense? So if you're thinking of the salary chart for last year, it would have been 1630. And then step 6 of someone coming in with experience, they would start at 1896.
Okay, so really the asterisk, there's asterisk by both of those, but really the asterisk should only be on one of those at the $16.30.
The asterisk represents the $2 additional stipend pay, because the chart is actually 1630, but the asterisk represents the additional $2 that we are paying.
So the
drivers right now.
$18.96 that's in the max hourly rate includes the $2.
Correct. For step 6.
Okay, so normally it would say 1630 and 1696 for our
Correct.
entry level
Correct.
and our max hourly rate.
Correct.
Okay, so then tell me again how someone gets to the salary cap?
By the base increases that they earn through their evaluation levels earned each year and the percents that the board approves for each year. Typically, the tier for classified staff, or at least for this year, if they received the highest level points on their evaluation, it was a 1% increase that the board approved. The next tier, I believe, was 0.75% increase and then 0.50% increase for levels 3 and 4, depending on their points or evaluation points earned at the end of last year. And then, so that's how we control that amount earned by having a salary cap. But you are correct. The districts that we examined do not have caps in place.
Okay. Based on this information, I would like to see in the potential proposals that are presented next month, 3 hourly rates, $19, $19.50, and $20 an hour. And I would also like to see potentially 2 options for trainee rates, somewhere in between where we decide to have the hourly rate and what our current trainee rate is. And I notice on here that many of the districts don't have a trainee hourly rate. Does that mean that people come in as a trainee at the full hourly rate that they would be working at once they are fully trained?
Those districts, they don't offer that. They expect the new hire to have a CDL, already be trained. So that's why that would read NA.
So there's no trainee
program like
Program.
Litchfield, correct.
Okay. In addition, I would like to see what the financial impact is of the dental, offering that as well, because obviously the majority of the comparable districts do offer that as well.
I did that dental estimate and it came out to 13,800. It's currently 394 annually. So, but we can definitely add that in the information requested.
believe that we made the decision for the stipends based on full-time versus part-time, and that the $350 should stand for December 2021. But that, because that is right around the corner, I think we should look at a retention bonus or stipend to be paid out in May for those folks who may join between now and the end of the year, as well as all of our current student transporters. I think that would be, potentially we would get more impact to the problem that we have right now of retention and recruitment, both, that would solve potentially both of those, because anyone we're recruiting now, it wouldn't be eligible for the 350, but potentially would be eligible for something that we can offer at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Moran, could I ask you to clarify what were the training numbers that you wanted us to bring back?
Well, I was going to say, well, I wasn't sure how the training worked, but I would say something more to meet in the middle. How many hours is the training, or how many weeks does the training take?
Approximately, what you said, 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's correct. About 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And how long are they, is that a full-time
Yeah,
hours for
Yeah,
5
yeah.
or 6 weeks?
yeah, that's for full-time student transporters.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe a couple of options that are, maybe one bump up and then somewhere closer to, what the average is that other districts are paying as well. So maybe 2 options with that.
I've got, I kind of look at it a little bit differently. What I see here is I kind of wish you got, I want to see a wish list from you guys, because you're the kind of the experts at it. So is that something that you could do to say, I mean, what would you like, and then we for sure will tell you, no, you won't get it, or yes, you will, or whatever. I just did $2 an hour on my calculator, 40 hours a week. I just put 52 weeks a year because I'm, simplistic. And just for 50 drivers, and it came up to $208,000 to give all 50 drivers a $2 an hour raise. I mean, I just want to know what kind of buckle, money we're talking about. Not that much, but I'm just saying that, yeah, I think it would be interesting to see kind of where, because you're hiring. What does it take, and maybe other things, maybe we need to hand out lollipops or, give out Snicker bars. That would really work,
So, Mr. Honak, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take your feedback. We're going to look at the comparison. We're going to take our staff feedback, and then we're going to come with a recommendation on November 9th, and that's in 2 weeks. So we're going to take all this, sit down and look through all of the feedback from our staff as well. And I know Amy and Superintendent Gunning took a lot of notes of what you guys recommended for us to go back. And then we will come back with our recommendation to you on the 9th. And then at that point, you can either take action or not tell us to go
Good, yeah,
back.
I kind of expected that, but I'm just
Yeah.
thinking a little more bias from the people that got to do it,
Yeah.
I mean,
And we-
that's the
yeah.
problem. I mean, you're driving a bus, aren't you too?
He is.
Yeah, like everybody is. So,
Yep, and Director White will definitely be in our team when we create this recommendation to bring back to you for sure.
yeah,
And yes,
perfect.
and let me just give a little kudos to Nathan. He is driving and in a new position and leading and directing and working with his admin team and doing all this. So absolutely, so unbelievable, the amount of things he's getting done and accomplishing right now to lead his department.
Also, I just want to point out, Megan, we heard, I mean, you said the staff survey had gone out and you read the wish list, at least of the staff members. So I mean, I think that's really important for us to consider. And I know you guys are obviously going to be considering that as well. We didn't have that in a typed form, but I think that is sort of the wish list that Jeremy was asking for, right?
Yes.
Is, pay obviously some benefits, some hours and things like that. So it seems like you guys have a good handle on what the staff is looking for, what's the most important. And I think hopefully we'll wrap all of that up with our comments and
And
put that together.
we had 100% participation from our student transporters in this feedback, and that was super important to us because we didn't want to hear from pockets. We wanted to hear from all of them, and they gave great feedback, and a lot of people took a lot of notes on there, filled the back of the page in also. So we want to make sure we review those because those just came in on Friday. And so we want to make sure we really sit down with that and the analysis to make a good recommendation on the 9th.
Great.
I
Thank you.
have two more things really quick. One is maybe you can answer this. Do we have any kind of stipend we do for the trainers, for the drivers? Because you said that they had asked for if that could be a 12-month position, or do we do a stipend right now for that, or no? It's just regular pay?
I'm going to let Director Sanders.
There is a $150 trainee stipend if they do the training and then they finish out the school year with us. That was something we added to our placement chart a few years ago.
So for
Trainers,
our
for
bus
the-
drivers who are actually training the new people coming in, do we have any kind of stipend for them?
We don't offer, no, there is no additional pay for bus drivers who serve as trainers.
Okay, well, I'd like to have some information about that possibly. And also, it would be very important to me that this pay, whatever we agree to their new pay, be for the entire, like for their whole day, not just while they're driving the bus.
I have a question, Melissa, just to your question, I guess. The bus driver trainers, are they paid at a different level? I'm just thinking in the sort of placement chart. So if you are driving a bus or training someone to drive a bus, you make the same amount hourly based on your experience. Okay, so that's where the stipend comes in because they're doing, okay, I understand. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, can I ask one more question, please? So we approved the $2 per hour stipend to get the funds to the drivers sooner rather than later. When you bring back this proposal to the next meeting and we vote on that, will that be replacing the stipend, or will the stipend still be in place through the end of the year, or will we be reshuffling those funds?
That is definitely something we will sit and talk about when we bring the recommendation on the 9th. We have not talked about that, so that's something we need to
Okay,
talk through.
consider. Okay.
Because if we approve, just so I understand what the time frame would be, if we approve the increase, would the increase be effective immediately or be effective January 1? Or what, do you know what that time frame would be, or that's yet to be determined?
It'll be part of the recommendation. Is what you said.
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone's expectations are in
Yes.
line, that when we're talking 19 or 1950, we are or are not. I guess I would assume we are not saying 1950 plus an additional $2 per hour for the remainder of the school
Yes.
year, that this would be a permanent increase
Yes,
going forward, and that we would then remove the $2
got it.
from the equation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no other questions. Thank you guys very much for the hard work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And last up this evening, discussion and first reading of revisions to our policies from the ASBA Policy Advisory. I won't read through all of those policies, but Roger, it looks like you're up first, maybe? Sure. Good evening, welcome. Thanks for hanging around for us.
Good evening, Madam Governing Board President and Governing Board members. So you guys should have a recommendation for Policy DJ, which is purchasing. Recently, House Bill 2210 passed that amended ARS 342, which is Governing Board discretionary powers. And part of that allows for the purchase now of food and beverage for events. So this policy would now allow us to purchase food and beverages for meetings, trainings, and things like that. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I don't have any questions. Anyone? Nope. No questions. And just to reiterate, this isn't for you specifically, Roger, but this is just the first read. So these will come back to us in November. I believe Megan said our meeting's on the 9th and we have the next regular meeting. So if there are any questions that come up, we will be presented this one more time.
Sorry, I do have a question. Not on the policy itself. I understand what the policy is saying. My question is on if this policy is adopted, and how will it then be executed? So if we can provide food and beverages at school functions and trainings, will there be a separate line item budgeted for that? Or will it depend on the event? I guess who is the person who would be in charge of the reasonability and accountability for these expenditures?
So initially, I've kind of started looking at that already. So before I would approve a purchase order for some type of food or beverage, that the school would need to provide some type of agenda showing what they were going to be discussing, who would be attending, and also the hours, right? Because if you're there from 8 to 10, do we really need to buy you lunch? And then what budgets would be available? Initially, talking to Wendy, it would be like gift grants, donations, and maybe civic center funds. Because I would hate to see M&O go to something like this. And I haven't seen the state constitution adjusted to allow for the use of M&O. So those are things that we're working on, and we do have initial plans in place to watch that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Jody, I think you're next for section G, personnel. No? Yeah, the next is section G, personnel. It's GCB, GCF, GDB, and GDF.
So, Madam President, members of the governing board, you have the new recommendations for these policies. They are put into effect due to House Bill 2268 and new ARS code 15341 for traditional public schools. For GCB, for GCF, per House Bill 2023, tied directly to ARS 15505. GDB, again, new House Bill 2268, aligned with ARS 15341. And then GDF for support staff's hiring, House Bill 2023, aligned to ARS 15505.
I have a question on the policy GCF, the professional staff hiring. Is it, I mean, obviously this isn't a policy yet, but is it in our practice or protocol maybe that we are already doing this and are checking the certificates of folks that we are looking to hire? And do we currently hire anyone with a certificate that has been suspended, surrendered, or revoked?
No, we do not hire anyone who has been suspended or revoked. And we already have this in practice. This is not going to change our practice. It's actually the policies catching up to the practice.
Okay, the assumption was there. I just wanted to verify for everyone out there. This feels like a little bit behind the times. I just want to make sure that we have not participated in that. Thank you. Any other questions on these personnel policies? Okay, so the next is section I for instruction, and that is Gina DePost.
The BIB.
Oh, my apologies. School board governance and operations. I apologize. I skipped right over it. Thank you, Amy.
So for BIB, this is tied directly to House Bill 2906, which was the added statute of ARS 411494. And you have the BIB and the BIB, the regulation attached to it and the recommendation for the changes.
Okay, and on this one, what is the sort of, how is this operationalized? Who is, is this training across the school district? I mean, for governing board members and other staff members, who is making that determination? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? To follow the policy?
Correct. So for governing board members, it would be handled directly through the superintendent's office of being able to reflect, to provide feedback. I think there'll be multiple checking points from a school level or a general staff level from our purchasing department, as well as Wendy Qualls and
Just the administration of
Wendy
the
Taylor.
district. Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you for keeping me in line, Amy. Next, we are at section I for instruction. Gina DeCoste. Thank you, Gina, for being patient with me.
Yes, and these would go into effect July 1, 2022 for the following school year. The first one, the IHA, is from Senate Bill 1572. So having that kindergarten through third grade, one person on each campus trained to screen for dyslexia, which we're already in the process of getting that training going for every reading specialist on the campus. So we'll meet that requirement definitely by the end of the school year, and then maybe even more because AD is providing lots of training opportunities.
And now does that, you said the reading specialist, does that count as a like K through 3 grade teacher, even though,
Yes.
okay, just certified position, basically. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Should I skip down to IHA and B? So some modified regulations there from House Bill 2035 on sex education and instruction. Doesn't really impact anything that we are doing or that we're not doing. But if you have questions, flip here. So if you look at IHA and B, and the one thing that we do in 5th grade is just around the corner, and then 7th grade is just a basic human. There's no sexual education, it's human. What did I write down? Human development, sorry. The one thing that we're working on that we don't have, if you go about halfway down the page, a school district or charter with existing sex education curricula shall include instruction on the laws relating to sexual conduct with a minor for pupils in grades 7 through 12. We don't have that in place. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll also be looking at just around the corner and our 7th grade human development, because we're not required to have those programs, to provide those programs. So. On page 3 of that policy, there is a certification of compliance that we will be submitting to Arizona Department of Education by December 15th, I believe is when that is due. So Dr. Pearson in curriculum is working on that. Any questions there? We can move on to IJ.
So are you saying that we're considering eliminating educating our students on puberty and human anatomy?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're considering it, but when we're looking at the policy, we want to look at and possibly bring back to you guys some consideration for what meeting the requirement for sexual conduct with a minor and how we educate 7th and 8th graders on that as a part of our curriculum, because the current adopted curriculum that we have for 7th graders is not really a published curriculum. It's created by the district and the commentary is by district employees. So we need to look at what that would look like.
But you mentioned just around the corner as well. So saying that that wasn't required. So
Correct.
that led me to believe that we're considering eliminating it, but that you're saying that's not the case. We're just looking at possibly improving that or maybe getting an updated version of puberty and how that impacts our
I don't think
students.
there is an updated version, but we just haven't looked at it for a long time. And with this new policy coming out, now we're taking a look at that. And we're just in the very beginning phases. So I don't have a lot of information on that for you.
Okay.
So do you want to skip to IJ? Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, so basically in IJ, they're just defining the term textbook. That's really nothing new or really any changes there. So. And then IMB is the teaching of, IKE. Okay, so we'll go to that one because that relates to the dyslexia bill that was passed that we've been, and we're actually already following these guidelines this year. We've been following the timelines for sending out the letters to the parents and letting them know that their students have fallen below. So the very first part of IKE-RB regulation, where it says within 3 weeks after identifying the reading deficiency, we started that this year. So we are on track with that one and those changes that will need to be made.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing IKE. Can someone
Did
help
I
me?
skip something? Did I skip?
No, it's
Um,
not listed here.
I don't see that one listed.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
That's not for review currently?
No,
Maybe
I have
for
so many.
November.
You have some, no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure you were talking and I was like, I don't see anything here about that. I don't remember reading it, so, okay.
Okay, so we're gonna skip to IMB, which is teaching about controversial and sensitive.
That's not on here either, Gina.
Oh, it's not, okay. Why is
The
this
next,
not?
the next one you have is policy KB for community relations, parent involvement in education.
Some of those policies that were recommended, they then pulled because of the action against what was included in the budget
Let me get to it.
reform.
So I think that's my last one.
Policy KB, the parent involvement in education. You're also listed for
I
that.
think I fell out of order with you guys.
Okay.
So do you have questions on that one? Because I am familiar with them. I just,
Right, that one just, I think that was part of the sex education instruction as well. Is it's recommending additional language that requires parents to opt in to the education. How does that differ from what we're currently doing?
which we already do. So.
Okay, so no changes to our practice, just updating our policy.
Mhm. Yes, for just around the corner and for the 7th grade one. I think I apologize. I think I mixed up my 2 packets of policies. So,
Thank you. It's okay. There was a lot of them this time. I think the ones that we have left is section J, students, and that is Wendy Qualls, and then the one policy JLF, and Megan, you can go just after her.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board and Superintendent Gunning. So policy JFAA and JFAB are for admission of students. Senate Bill 1420 requires any political subdivision of the state to accept the counselor's identification card is issued by a federal government as a valid form of ID when the parents come in to register the student. So that's the change with all of these policies, is just to accept that form of ID.
That doesn't seem like that would come up all that often. But I'm glad that we have a policy addressing it just in case.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning. I am presenting a first read of policy JLF, reporting child abuse and child protection. This policy is in regards to Senate Bill 1114 and has added that Senate bill has added ARS 15-160.01. And basically it says that our school district shall post clearly visible in a public area, readily accessible to students, a sign that contains information in regards to how to call if you suspect abuse or neglect of children, instructions to call 911, and directions for accessing the website of the Department of Child Safety.
Is that geared towards our employees?
Well, it's for, it states that it has to be readily accessible to students
Okay.
for them to read and see how to access that support.
Themselves. Okay,
Mhm.
understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to reiterate very quickly, this is the first read. This will be back to us at the next meeting. So if there's any follow-up questions, board members, you can ask at that time. We'll have the chance to discuss that as well in the November meeting. If there are not any other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I motion to adjourn.
I'll go
Second.
second.
Wonderful. Everyone is ready to get out of here. Motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?